Remember the good old days when we were still excited for KSP2 multiplayer to come out?
I'm not currently able to give any specifics around multiplayer, other than to say, as we've been testing it internally, I have never heard people laugh so hard.
Take-Two has robbed us of this experience, but it did exist, and I have seen it. Today, we'll talk about how far the developers got with KSP multiplayer. Hello everybody, and welcome! If you remember my previous video on Kerbal Space Program 2's crazy development history, I told you that I'm going to do a deep dive into what multiplayer for this game could have been. So, here we are! Everything you're going to see and hear is based on conversations I had with people that were directly involved with the game and actual gameplay I was able to see. Unfortunately, I'm not able to show you that gameplay, otherwise I would put those people into deep trouble, and I really don't want to do that. I mean, just look at what happened with the AMA that former technical director Paul Furio wanted to do on the KSP subreddit, and how Take-Two's legal team immediately went after him. Before we start, I just want to say thank you to everyone that subscribed to my channel. Together we managed to grow this channel pretty substantially, but we're still shy of the 100,000 mark. So if you're interested in space technology, space history or space-related games, hit that subscribe button so you can become part of the ShadowZone community. We also have a dedicated Discord server if that's your thing, link is in the description. Speaking of being a thing, Kerbal Space Program 2 multiplayer almost wasn't one. Or to quote one of my sources, it was never going to happen. The clip I showed you in the beginning was from September 2019, when I interviewed creative director Nate Simpson during PAX West, shortly after the game was announced for the first time. The hype around it was immense, and apparently Nate was misleading everyone during that interview, to put it mildly, because that quote about multiplayer and it being fun? Well, as it turns out, that was him referring to a session the team had with modded KSP1. Up until that time, no multiplayer code had been written for KSP2 at all. And the team was not confident that it would ever be possible to make the game a multiplayer game. Remember, back in 2019, the game was still developed by a small team at Star Theory, and the plan was to basically do a refresh of the original game by polishing the code and making it prettier. Nate's expanded vision for the game with interstellar colonies and multiplayer seriously put that project in jeopardy. The original release date of spring 2020 as just a refresh of KSP would have been possible according to multiple people that were part of the development team during the Star Theory days, with Interstellar as a potential stretch goal. But colonies and multiplayer were unrealistic to finish until then. As one former Star Theory employee put it, multiplayer was the killer. It was never going to happen. From what I was told, the viability of multiplayer led to heated discussions between Nate Simpson and the actual developers, specifically then lead engineer David Gunderman, who had taken over the role after the original principal engineer Chuck Noble had left the project. Nate didn't want to accept his assessments because he had nobody else telling him no. This was exacerbated by the fact that the publisher's franchise director Michael Cook put his weight behind the expanded vision for KSP2 that Nate had sold during the interviews with me and other content creators. This is a problematic theme that continued throughout the entire development of the game. If Nate Simpson was an addict for more features, Michael Cook was his enabler, and there were multiple instances in KSP2's history where this dynamic led to issues. But for this video, let's keep the focus on multiplayer, and to do that we first have to figure out what even is Kerbal multiplayer. I want you to pause this video and write a comment what you envision when you hear Kerbal multiplayer, independent of any mods that already exist for the original. Take your time, I'll wait here. The reason I have asked you to do this exercise is that scoping a feature, defining the limits of what a thing within a piece of software actually is supposed to be, is one of the most difficult things in software development to get right. Multiplayer in KSP2 could have gone many directions. A static physics bubble around the Kerbal Space Center in which the players are confined to perform just some fun dogfights and slam rockets into each other. Or you could play an epic space race with players trying to be the first to colonize other celestial bodies. Or collaborate on multi-part vehicles where each player builds their part in their respective colony, then combine everything and go on an interstellar adventure together. Or interplanetary piracy, where you could waylay ore shipments from another player and snatch them for yourself. Which direction did your vision for Kerbal multiplayer take you? It won't come as a surprise that KSP attracted a variety of different types of players. The original game's developers were able to segment them into 3 broad categories. Those that were into it for the majesty of space, those that just wanted to mess around and blow stuff up, and finally the engineer type, not necessarily in a technical sense, more in that they enjoyed a challenge and figure out how to creatively solve a problem within constraints. It won't come as a surprise then that the latter category enjoyed KSP's career mode the most and also made up a large part of the player base, which makes the deprioritization of career mode for KSP2 even worse than it already was. What does that have to do with multiplayer? Well, depending on which type of player you are, you will have a different idea for what direction this feature should take. Keep that in mind when we talk about how KSP2 multiplayer took shape. When you look at the credits for Kerbal Space Program 2, you will only find 2 people with multiplayer in their job title: designer Thomas Spradling and engineer Eric Milota. In February 2020, development of KSP2 was taken away from Star Theory, and the new studio Intercept Games was founded by Take-Two and put under the wings of its supposed indie game publishing company Private Division. Spradling joined the team in July 2020, 10 months after creative director Nate Simpson had claimed the team had so much fun with multiplayer. Until then, no meaningful work had been put into that aspect of the game. In the previous section of this video we talked about scoping features. So, which direction did the KSP2 team take? According to my research, the first goal was, and I quote, "smash rockets into each other." But there was also the ambition for competitive space races, and they apparently also wanted to make it cooperative. In hindsight, it appears to me they wanted to be everything for everyone, which might have resulted in a lack of focus in the right direction for the feature. From what I was able to piece together, the designs for KSP2 multiplayer were done before engineer Eric Milota joined in February 2021. Those designs included a solution for how to deal with time warp, which was regarded as the biggest problem. More on that later. However, since the game was based on the original Kerbal Space Program code, there was a lot that had to be developed from scratch. Given that only one engineer worked on multiplayer, there was actually a lot of work done before the game went into early access. And now we can finally talk about what KSP2 multiplayer was actually like. Everything I tell you now is based on gameplay I saw of multiplayer-capable builds of the game. Unfortunately, I cannot show you recordings or screenshots, but I will try to visualize it based on my notes and memory. To start it off, there was a selection between single-player and multiplayer in the game's start screen. From there, a player could either host or join a dedicated server. Servers could be password protected or made invite-only. A hosting player would be in control of the multiplayer session. The first implementation of time warp in multiplayer also gave control over it into the hands of the host. There were plans for every player to somehow control time at a later point in development, but that was never implemented. Overall, 5 different solutions were mulled over. The host controlling time warp was just the easiest one to implement so that the developers had something to try out. The network code was supposedly stable. I saw multiple computers connecting to the same server, not just over a local network, but via internet connection. Once connected, you could access a panel showing you information about other players. Player name, the player's space agency, including their flag and color scheme, what they were doing, for instance, in VAB or at KSC or flying. Then location of the player, for instance, Kerbin or Minmus or any other celestial body, and player's active vehicle. The host of the game would store the state of the game world on their machine. That way, players could pause a cooperative session and continue later. If you sift through KSP2 save games, you can see fragments of this in the structure of the file. There is something called host player active vessel name in the metadata section. There is also the agencies section, implying that there could be more than just the one of the current player. Also, there is a unique identifier for players and player name. And yes, players were able to inhabit the same physics bubble and interact with each other. What I was told, but not shown, was that the game would ask players aligning two vessels with docking ports if they wanted to dock. However, it was not decided who would control the vehicle. Apparently, at the latest state of KSP2 multiplayer, both players could control the combined vessel at the same time. Certainly a recipe for some hijinks. From what I was told, every playtesting session invariably ended in people deliberately trying to ram their rockets into each other. Also, there was some Mario Kart-style racing going on around the Space Center. I told you how creative director Nate Simpson misled everyone in my interview, implying that they had so much fun with KSP2 multiplayer when it was in fact just old KSP with mods. In a later interview, he claimed that multiplayer became a problem for productivity because people were playing KSP2 multiplayer so much. People have accused him of lying about that. However, my sources confirmed to me that this was actually the case. Multiplayer playtesting sessions, by the nature of the feature, involved multiple people, and according to those sources, it was the most fun part of the game, keeping the participants engaged for hours at a time. Mind you, the experience was far from bug-free. In the sequences I saw where multiple players were within the same physics bubble, there were glitches and effects not working, and also a decent amount of lag. But that was a general issue of the game. Multiplayer might have been already fun in its bare-bones state, but the fun wouldn't last. Because even before the entire development of KSP2 was shut down, multiplayer was already put out to pasture. What killed KSP2 multiplayer? I already told you that only 2 people worked on the multiplayer portion of Kerbal Space Program 2. If that alone wasn't an indictment of a low priority on that feature, it gets worse. All other features were designed with just single-player experience in mind. This became more and more of a problem the further the game progressed. Add to that the fact that multiplayer was communicated as the last item on the roadmap for KSP2, production people didn't want to focus on it earlier despite engineering begging them to do so, because in reality, if you want to make your game a multiplayer game, it has to be baked in from the start at every decision.
Some very foundational things have to be decided at the beginning of development.
Yep.
Thomas Spradling, the only designer that had worked on multiplayer, left Intercept Games in February 2022, leaving Eric Milota as the sole team member to keep working on that element of the game. The release of KSP2 into early access and the negative responses from the community lowered morale significantly. Then, as I already told you in my History of KSP2 video, technical director Paul Furio and studio head Jeremy Abels were fired. Eric Milota was let go just 3 months later, leaving multiplayer completely hung out to dry. Internally, people were already saying that multiplayer would never make it into the final product. The only reason this was kept on the wraps was that the feature was highlighted as the final milestone of the public roadmap, and the decision makers feared additional backlash. So, what killed KSP2 multiplayer? Lack of resources and lack of focus. Or in a broader sense, organizational incompetence. A theme that winds itself like a red thread throughout the entire development history of the game. And we of course all know how the rest of KSP2's development went. Killed off by Take-Two by shutting down the development studio and never losing a word about it. And with this, we arrive at the conclusion. What I think of KSP2 multiplayer. Honestly, I was surprised to see what was already possible in regards to multiplayer in KSP2. The few people that had worked on it had created a foundation that was at least stable enough to build upon. Sure, it was far from finished, but the potential was there. The question still remains, who was this feature for? From what I saw and the retellings of the playtesting sessions, the focus had seemed to be on the people that liked to crash into stuff, the second group of players of original KSP I talked about. For a broader appeal, there should have been more to it, but then again, KSP2 multiplayer was far from finished. Either way, just like the game overall, this story is yet another example of a missed opportunity. A wasted opportunity, rather. Tell me in the comments what your take on this is now that you know how far the developers came with this feature. Are you also surprised by the progress? Or was this not enough for the time and resources dedicated not to the game itself, but just this feature? Personally, I don't believe a sequel to KSP would have needed multiplayer. I never found the idea too appealing when thinking about how I myself play the game, except that I wanted just one thing from KSP2. I wanted to build spaceships and fly epic interstellar missions together with my kids. That ship has sailed, and I will never forgive the people responsible for taking this away from me and my family. But we will find something else. Just like we found mountain biking. That's my 12-year-old ahead of me on the jump line at the bike park. Full video is up on my mountain bike channel, link is in the description. What's also in the description are my links to become a channel member and to my Patreon. For just a small amount you can help me do these types of deep dive videos and increase the quality of my content. And if you choose one of the higher tiers, your name will show up here, just like all of these wonderful folks. Thank you so much for your support. And thanks again to all of you for watching until the end. Don't forget to like and subscribe and never stop believing in a future for humanity in the stars.
If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel for more and follow me on my social thingies. The links are in the description. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.